I'm Trisha. I just found out that the notes for this presentation aren't working on my phone, so what could possibly go wrong? It's mostly live demo, so that never goes wrong. It's completely fine. Right, so I'm here to talk to you about developer productivity with IntelliJ IDEA. Yes, I have got an introduction for me. I am Trisha G. I'm currently a lead developer advocate at Gradle. You might have seen me in the past doing stuff for JetBrains, which is when I used to do loads of IntelliJ IDEA stuff. I'm also a Java champion. And I have to mention the fact that I wrote books because I need you to buy my book. That'd be great. A lot of the stuff from this demo comes from the IntelliJ IDEA book. And I will be giving away a copy of the IntelliJ IDEA book at the end of this presentation. Also, we'll be talking about 97 things every Java programmer should know tomorrow, so feel free to come to that presentation too. Right, let's get straight on to the demo, because I want to talk about how IntelliJ IDEA can help us get more productive, so what I'm going to do is show you how productive it is. I'm a bit small and I can't see over the top of this, so I'll just huddle behind my screen here. What could possibly go wrong? I don't know why I do live demos. It's an absolute nightmare. Right, let's zoom this in so you can actually see it. Is that okay? Okay. Let us... Oh, I should have deleted that. Right, never mind. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new project, which is a Hello World project. So we'll call this Hello. Let's try and spell that correctly. We are going to get it to create a Git repository. We're going to use Gradle, of course, because I work for Gradle. We're going to use Groovy because I'm old-fashioned and I don't use Kotlin, but don't tell JetBrains that because they won't like that very much. So this will create me a new standard IntelliJ IDEA project with everything it needs, including all the structure. And then I'm going to create a new class. We're going to call it, let's paste in the package name. So did you know if you put the package name in front of your Java class, it will automatically create the right directory structure to seat the Java class in. I haven't asked you folks, who is a Java programmer here? Great, awesome, thank goodness. Otherwise, there's a whole bunch of Erlang people going, I don't care about this. And we're going to create a main method. We don't need to type public static void main. We just have to type main. It will get automatically generated. And we can type system out, and it will automatically do that too. I'm not going to use IntelliJ IDEA's full-line code completion just yet, because I'm not talking about AI just yet. And then we run that, and then it runs successfully and prints out hello. Great. And we can even go, it's not just about writing lines of code, it's about the full experience of creating a new project. So we're going to commit this, call it initial commit, because it created a Git repository. And we can share this on GitHub. We'll call it, fine, let's call it hello, and stick it on GitHub. So not only have I created some code, but I've also done the right thing in terms of creating a repository and do small commits and all those good things. It's not just about writing throwaway code, and publish it on GitHub, because who doesn't want 30,000 misnamed repositories on their GitHub profile? Right. So that's great. That's the end of my demo. You can stop being in my presentation now. No. So the point about this is to show that an IDE can help you write code faster and can also help you with some of the bigger stuff in terms of like packaging it up and creating the right structure and all the rest of it. And the question here really is, was I actually productive? Particularly in terms of the fact that I just showed you a Hello World application, and how many of you have written a Hello World application in the last month? One person. Great. Well done. Because that's not what we do. We do complicated stuff around actually reading code and figuring out where the code goes. So it's a bit of a toy demonstration. You can actually ask IntelliJ IDEA, how productive was I? And this tells me I've saved 141 characters per working day. I had to type far less in the working day because I was using code generation and code completion. The sad thing about this is you can tell I'm not a real programmer by looking at those stats, because I don't write lots of code every day. But you can use the productivity guide, which you can find on the help menu, to see which features you're using, which ones you are saving you time and potentially saving you from creating bugs, and which ones you don't use, which might be worth looking up and finding out how that goes. But let's talk about let's talk about AI, because it's 2024 and you're not allowed into a conference anymore if you don't talk about AI. That's the rules, I don't make them. So AI, obviously, is supposed to make us 5,000 times more productive. Everybody knows this. Certainly anyone who wants to sell you an AI solution will tell you this. So I'm going to say, OK, I'm using JetBrains AI Assistant because they gave it to me for free, and it's in my IDE, so why not? So I'll say, can you please create me a Hello World application in Java? And it does, because, it's Hello World. It's not that difficult. It even tells you how to run it and all the rest of it, which is, oh, hold on. Yes, that's fine. It even tells you how to run it, and that's great. And as the AI technologies get a bit more, get faster and more advanced, they actually become vaguely helpful. Because the first time I ran this demo, it took longer to generate the Hello World application from AI than me just typing, main and getting the IDE code generation to do it for me. So that's kind of fine. What I would really like to do is I would like to say, OK, can you do the thing I just did? Can you, I don't need to do this because I've got a slide for this. Can you create me the project, do the whole thing that I just did, create the project from scratch, create Git repository, do all that stuff, and create Hello World? And it goes, no, I can't do that. I'm just an AI thing. I can't do anything useful for you. So right now, I feel like AI is kind of, there's a lot of things that IDE can do for you and has done for you for a long time that you're probably going to continue to do in the old-fashioned way and not necessarily use AI for. I might use it a little bit later on for some tests, because there's some interesting stuff around testing with the AI assistant, but I might forget. So let's talk a bit about what productivity really is, particularly as people are telling us that AI is coming for our jobs and you won't need to type code anymore, which seems a little bit alarmist. The SPACE framework is one of the ways of talking about what makes us, as developers, productive. It talks about satisfaction and well-being, performance, activity, communication and collaboration, efficiency and flow. Often, when we're talking about measuring a developer's performance or the team's performance, we focus on the activity side of stuff. So activity is lines of code, commits, pull requests, all those things which are really easy to measure. What I like about SPACE is it says there's way more to a developer's productivity than just these metrics of like writing code faster or signing off pull requests faster. As a developer, I'm way more interested in my satisfaction and well-being and efficiency and flow, because flow is the thing that really interests me as a developer. As you all know, it's not necessarily about, typing faster. It's about not thinking about all of that nonsense and just thinking about the problem at hand and just going with it. And that's the thing I really want to show for IntelliJ IDEA, but it's very difficult to demo flow because the very definition of flow means that I can't talk to you about being in the flow while being in the flow. What I can do is try and show you some of the stuff that helped me be in the state of flow. And then the other thing I kind of think is interesting from a productivity point of view is communication and collaboration. But this might be because I'm a developer advocate rather than straight-up developer, and communication is a thing that I like to do. But this is a key part of what makes us productive too, because as you know, and there's probably been numerous talks about it at this conference already, as developers, we don't just write code. We need to be listening to people about what the code should do and what it is, and working with our team to create a good solution, and then hopefully working with other people to make sure that what we did is the right thing. And these things are not often measured when it comes to productivity. So, having said all that, let's talk about writing code a bit faster. So we are going to TDD some stuff. I hope Dave Farley and etc. are in the audience and watching me do TDD. Yes. TDD is a good thing. You should definitely try it. So I'm going to create a new Java class. It is going to be a square test. And I'm going to use code generation to create a new test method. Now, IntelliJ IDEA with things like code generation is always going to try and do the smallest possible thing to keep your code compiling, which is kind of a different way of working to just breaking stuff and then trying to fix things as you go along. In this case, the smallest thing that compiles is this, but this is not what I want my tests to look like. And by the way, if you care about what the keyboard shortcuts are, they're all at the bottom. I'm not going to keep saying keyboard shortcuts. What I've got is I have a custom live template which creates tests the way I want them to be. So my tests are going to start with a word should, and are going to have a given when and then, and are going to have a display name, should have 4 sides, and allow me to write a descriptive test name so that it actually does what it says on the tin. I'm going to create a new square, and I'm going to get IntelliJ IDEA to create the class, put it in the right place, put it in the production code, and I'm going to, I want to assign this to a variable. What I usually do is I usually use introduce variable to just assign it to a variable. Particularly if you're going to if you're going to have a square equals new square, you don't want to type square 3 times. That's like so many characters of typing you don't need to do. However, there's a few different ways of doing this. Some people prefer to use Alt-Enter, because Alt-Enter is your magic go-to shortcut. If you don't know what to do, just press Alt-Enter, and that will introduce a variable for you. Or everyone's favorite code completion is postfix completion. So I can type VAR, and it will assign it to a variable. Postfix completion is just awesome. If you haven't tried it before, press dot, press up, and then you see a whole bunch of templates that you can call around your code. So some of my favorite ones here are cast, and it will automatically wrap it in all those silly parameters, silly braces, so you can cast something, or not null, which will do a null check on it, and all these things. So postfix completion is really good for wrapping the thing that you just wrote in something standard. The idea of postfix completion is to just keep typing forwards all the time. So instead of having to go back and wrap it in something, use postfix to just kind of keep typing forward and stay in the flow. This is the whole point about the way IntelliJ is designed, is to kind of keep you moving forward and thinking forwards. OK, so I've got one of those. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to assert equals. If I'm not sure, I use Command P to figure out which one is the expected and which one is the actual. So I'm going to assert that square.get sides is 4. Do Alt-Enter to create a method. Alt-Enter in this case gives us 3 different options. Create method, get sides, create property sides, or create read-only property sides in Square. Now, for about 5 years, I always just automatically picked the first one because it does what I thought I wanted. But actually what I want is the third one, a read-only property, so that I can have a field and the getter for that field. The second one gives you a getter and a setter. Setters are bad, so just don't do that. So create a read-only property. I'm going to do the bare minimum to get it to compile, and the test should fail because we do, red, green, refactor. I hope Martin's in here somewhere. And so my test is going to fail. And then I'm going to go back and make it pass. See, it's a shortcut that says rerun tests that doesn't actually rerun the tests every single time. Let's just do that. So rerun the tests, and then it passes. And talking about refactoring, once you have a passing test, what you might want to do is press F2 to have a look at any errors or issues which are in your code. Alt and Enter to say, what do you want me to do with this thing? Because you're telling me there's a warning and I don't know what to do. So I can do something like, I can convert this field to a local variable because I'm not using it as a field. I can inline it because I'm not using it at all. I can just do the simplest thing possible. Or I might decide I want to extract a constant here. So let's call it number of sides. Whatever I want to do, I can move the code around. Now I've got a compiling piece of code. I have a test which tests what I want to assert. Now I can comfortably and happily refactor the code, get IntelliJ to move stuff around without worrying too much about breaking anything, and then rerun my tests and make sure everything still passes. So everything is always green. So we should be staying in the flow and constantly moving forwards. OK, you're all going to see my notes as I look at them, because my notes are supposed to be on the phone, and they're not on the phone, so you get to see my notes. Let's see, refactor. Cool, all right. So that's writing code. And we've seen suggestions of basic completion, live templates, including custom templates. So if you're interested in that custom template for creating a test method, I wrote a blog post about that. At the end of this talk, there's a QR code which will link you to a page on my website which has links to all of this information. Live templates, new, including generate from error, Alt-Enter for everything, and refactoring. The reason I mention these things is my key when I'm trying to teach people stuff is I need to give people the words they're going to Google, because it's difficult to Google something if you don't know what you're Googling for. That thing that Trisha showed on the stage, which was really cool, tends not to give you very many answers. And so I asked Twitter, which I refuse to call X, what's good about IntelliJ IDEA, and a bunch of people said the automatic refactoring. Like, to me, this is definitely one of the key features which helps me be productive as a developer. Let's see. Should we do these? Yes. So there's some more tips which I want to show you because they're kind of cool and fun. And they're the sorts of things that I use all the time as a developer, where my fingers just know what to do with the keys, and it just keeps me not worrying about certain things. So one of those things is smart completion. Let's find smart completion. No, it's in completion. Oh, I didn't reset this after I practiced the demo earlier. So smart completion. So we know about basic completion. IntelliJ IDEA just automatically pops up a whole bunch of suggestions, kind of random stuff that's kind of vaguely in the same area as a list. And we also have this new full-line code completion, which is a machine learning completion, but it doesn't dial outside of your code. It's all local on your actual machine, which is and the full-line code completion is kind of irritating to me when I'm demoing stuff, because it usually guesses correctly what I want to do, and it negates the other thing I'm trying to demo. So ignore that for now. The smart completion is, oh my goodness, now I can't remember any of the keyboard shortcuts, because I started thinking. I'm having a complete blank on smart completion. And it says it here, Control, Shift, and Space. See, comments can be good in your code, Control, Shift, and Space. And then it will only give you type matching completion. So it'll only give you the types which matches what's on the left-hand side. And if there's only one type that matches, it just automatically completes all of that stuff for you. So again, you don't have to think, oh, which type do I want? It just fills it in for you. The other thing that I quite like is, this is kind of a dumb thing on this example, is complete current statement. A lot of the time for Java code, that just sticks a semicolon on the end, because semicolons are important and we mustn't forget them. But one of the other things we can do for complete statement is we can use it for things like I type a 4, and complete current statement will also do all your braces and all your curly braces and just make sure the shape of the statement is correct. It will also work for, well, it will work for methods, actually. Put your curly braces on and stuff like that. So I use this quite a lot. My fingers just do it as I'm typing, so I don't have to think, what do I need to do to make this code compile? IntelliJ just chucks in all of my braces and my semicolons and all the boilerplate that everyone loves so much about Java. And let's do, I showed Alt-Enter earlier. One of the things that I think I didn't realize about Alt-Enter before I started pairing with people who know IntelliJ way better than I did, is you can press Alt and Enter on code that doesn't have an error or a warning, and it'll offer you a whole bunch of suggestions on things to do with this code. So if I have a standard for loop, it'll go, well, do you want this to be a stream operation? I'll go, yeah, I think I do. And then sometimes you can do the same thing on the, let's see if this works. Right, you can do the same thing on the result and turn it back. They mostly go in both directions. So you can use Alt-Enter to go, this code looks kind of weird, I don't really like it. What are you suggesting that I could do with it? Another thing it can do, for example, is it can revert, where's it gone? Well, it can unroll stuff, that can be more efficient. And it should also offer to reverse the direction. So you can do things like reverse direction. It's really good on things like Booleans. It will help you flip a Boolean without you having to go, if it's a not, and then I have to do an and or an or, just get IntelliJ to do that for you. Just negate this. And another thing that's really helpful is multi-caret. So if I press Alt or Option, and then press it a second time and hold it down, then I can get multiple carets. So I can do things like type final on all the lines, or add a semicolon at the end of all the lines. It's quite helpful for things like adding finals. It's really useful for things like any string manipulation stuff, because you can just kind of do the same thing on all the different lines. I use this all the time for doing things like editing properties files or configuration files, that kind of thing, where I want the same shaped stuff on multiple lines. OK, but we actually don't write code anywhere near as much as we read code. And I would argue that a tool like an IDE is way more helpful for understanding the code than for writing it. Particularly if, for example, you're just going to get AI to generate all your code for you, then probably you really need to understand that code afterwards. So there's a whole bunch of tips in IntelliJ for helping us to understand the code that we either inherited or we wrote ourselves last week and can't remember what on earth we were doing. What were we thinking when we wrote this code? So we used to talk about, in the olden days, when I first started doing this talk, we used to talk, I'm going to talk about navigation first, because navigation obviously is a way, for me, navigating through the code is one of the ways that I understand how the code fits together. So I don't know how you all feel, but when I'm reading code in a pull request, and I'm trying to read code in a linear way, I don't understand code that way. It's not particularly helpful for me. What I really need to do is I want to dive in here or have a look at this or go back here. So I feel like reading code is a very active thing, not a passive. It's not a book. You're not going to read it line by line. And one of the things we're going to do is navigate to a class, for example. So you used to have to do navigate class, and let's say completion. Navigate class, navigate file, navigate symbol. You don't need to do any of that. If you need to find something in IntelliJ IDEA, you press Shift twice, and you get search everywhere. And this will allow you to search for literally anything: a class, a file, an action, a GitHub commit, full text search, that kind of thing. So, for example, if I type completion, I can, in the first page, you can see a class file, which is completion. You see some settings to do with, that start with comp. And then you can also see some packages and some comments and so on. If I want to narrow down the results to something else, I can tab across and say, only look at classes, or only look at files, only look at symbols, which includes methods. So this is really helpful for navigating directly to a method. Actions. So I use actions quite a lot for things like, let's see, tab placement. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't have tabs on the top of my editor because I don't need them, and I'll show you why in a minute. But I can turn on tabs from search everywhere. I don't have to go to the settings file, the settings dialog. I almost never go to the settings dialog. What I do is I use search everywhere to do the thing that's in my head right now, close that down, and carry on with the thing that I was doing. So I don't break my concentration so much. I can just sort of stay in the flow. You can also search for git commits, which wasn't working the other day. So yeah, that would totally work normally. Don't know why it's not working now. And full text search as well. So that's a good way to find literally anything. Something else. Oh, I really don't want my tabs. So let's turn off my tabs. The reason I don't use tabs is I use Command E to open up my recent files. And so this is what would be on the tabs if I had the tabs open. But I don't want the tabs open because they take up valuable screen real estate. And I also find them quite distracting. So I'm going to use Command E to open up all my recent files. I can press it twice to only limit it to any files I've edited lately. I tend not to use that. It's not as useful. The other thing that Command E is really helpful for is opening the windows, the tool windows that don't have keyboard shortcuts. For example, the Gradle tool window, which doesn't have a keyboard shortcut. So you can use Command E for that. The other thing you can use is Command Shift E to look at recent locations. And this includes different snippets of code that you've been working on. So you can see I've got 2 different parts of the multi-caret class. I've got several different parts of the completion class. And so that will allow me to navigate backwards and forwards through the things I'm actively working on right now. I use this all the time when I'm just trying to create a test and look at the production code, and then I've drilled into a different class, and where was I? So I can kind of follow my train of thought by looking at recent locations. And let's look at, right, so we were talking about understanding code. So the first thing was about navigating through our code. The next thing is about understanding the code that we've got. So let's see if I've got, do I have reading code? Yes. Let's undo that. So if you are drilling into something like a library method or a library class, you'll notice that the code actually looks a little bit different. IntelliJ IDEA has reading mode, and so it will display things in a slightly different way. For example, it's going to render your Java doc comments so that you don't have the HTML. It's kind of a prettier rendered version of the comments. And this gives you a hint that this is not your code. Don't try changing any of this. This is some library code that you're trying to understand. You can actually tune how this looks in the settings, but generally I haven't needed to do that. If you do like the rendered Java doc comments, you can turn that on in your own code as well. And this is quite nice for A, shrinking down the amount of space it takes, and B, seeing it with all of the bolds and any formatting that you might have in any of your comments. You can change the size of this as well by right-clicking, and you can change the font size if you want to. Let's put it on a tiny font size. You can't see that at all. Something else that I found really helpful for understanding code, in real life, some of our classes are less than optimal and have a lot of code in, and we're trying to figure out like what each of the blocks of code does. Or you're trying to get stuff away from your vision because it's kind of distracting you. So one of the things you can use for that is you can use... oops, that's not what I wanted to do. If you wanted to say, I quite often do this with my private methods. If I want to kind of fold away my private methods and I know I don't really need to think about them, I'm going to wrap these in an editor fold, and I'm going to call this helper methods. And then I can just shrink that down with this comment so that I just go, okay, I know I don't need to worry about those things. I don't have to commit that comment if I don't want to. It's just if I'm trying to understand a particular class, I might want to fold things away so that I don't pay attention to them when I'm thinking about something else. I've just seen Donald Raab using this in his Eclipse Collections library. He does this to group together different types of methods. So on various interfaces, he's got like filter methods and sorting methods and other types of methods. And he uses the editor fold to kind of group them together with a sort of annotation so that you can more clearly understand what these groups of methods are supposed to be doing. Quick definition, quick document, right. And quick definition is, I don't really use this, but I feel like I should. So I can use F1 to just pop up the Java doc for this particular method, or I can use, it is option and space. Oops. I can also pop up the implementation of the method that I'm looking at so that I can see. I don't have to drill into that class and get distracted by that class. I can just be like, oh, okay, that's just a simple one-line method. I don't need to worry about that. Again, the whole point is to try and keep us in the flow, keep our context, which is important, right in front of us, rather than distracting us and derailing us. Okay, navigation, recent files, reading mode, definition, documentation, and folding. Right, and so then a bunch of people were saying the navigation thing is a really important part of the IDE because it helps us to understand the code and how it fits together. You can also use things like find usages, and you can drill into declarations and so on to follow the line of the logic as it goes through the code. If you are interested, I do have a course on LeanPub, which shows all the stuff we just did in terms of like the writing code, the reading code, understanding code is all there. This QR code, well, this is on the page on my blog of the QR code that's at the end of the talk. I'm trying to get through things really quickly, which is why I'm a bit frazzled. Debugging. I'm assuming everyone uses a debugger. I mean, I say that, and then I find out lots of people don't use a debugger. But the debugger is a really valuable thing, not just for finding problems, but for understanding how code works. It's particularly helpful if you do have a unit test, because you can kind of use that as a starting point and go through and figure out what on earth is happening in my code. I'm just going to demo a couple of the simplest things in the debugger. I found out the IntelliJ IDEA debugger does crazy, ridiculous things, which are super complicated. And I never really use any of that, and most people don't. But if you are interested, on the JetBrains YouTube channel, they do have some videos of some ridiculous things you can do with a debugger. So if you want to do advanced debugging, go and have a look at those videos. But what I'm going to show is the simple stuff that gets used all the time when I'm running tests or trying to debug code. So obviously, breakpoints, you want to put a breakpoint in, and you're going to debug the code by pressing debug and have it rebuild everything. And so IntelliJ IDEA is going to show you in these kind of inline comments the state of the various variables. I can click on this, and I can drill in and see the values of the fields and so forth. I can actually do something cool here, which is a little bit advanced, but I really like it. I'm going to do it anyway. You can create a renderer for your objects. So how many times have you seen something like the toString, well, yeah, the object ID as the toString for an object in the debugger? And you're like, I don't know what this object is because I don't have any useful information about that object. I have to drill into it. Whereas really what I want to do is I really want you to see, I want to see like 1 or 2 fields from that object in the debugger so I get some context about that object. And you can create a renderer for that. It's called a Java type renderer. And then you can use an expression and say, for example, I just want you to show me just the first name on this object in the debugger. And then all it will do is it will change what's rendered to whatever expression you put into that field. So you can more easily pick out the things which are important to you when you're debugging, which might be very different to whatever the toString is, because the toString is used for something different. So that's one thing. And then, of course, we can step into, I'm just going to step straight into that. One of the things that I think is quite useful about the debugger, which I didn't know about, is this tiny button here, which is called reset frame. So if I step in, let's say this is a complicated method, and I've done a few steps, and I'm like, oh, I really don't want to be here. I want to go back. And in the past, I always used to just stop the debugger and start all over again, getting to the state where I want it to be. You don't have to do that. You can just reset frame. That will drop you back a step, and then you can go back into that method and start again. So it just resets that state, which is super helpful. The other thing you can do for breakpoints is you can set a condition on a breakpoint, so it will only break under certain circumstances. Often when I've set a breakpoint, particularly if you've got a breakpoint in something like some library code, it gets fired and fired and fired and fired, and you keep going skip, 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 and then you skip over the one that you wanted, and you're like, oh my god, I have to do that all over again. But you don't need to do that. You just set a condition on it, and you say, you know, when this object has some state, when it has this particular field value, or when something else is at this particular state, then, and only then, will you stop the breakpoint. So it stops you having to go next, next, next all the time. Okay. And you probably know already, you can see down here the various in-state variables, but you can also evaluate expressions. So I can put in any arbitrary expression there, and it will tell me what the state is right now. You can also use evaluate expression, and you can type in any arbitrary Java statement here. So I use this when I'm debugging to set the state to something else. So I'm like, OK, what happens if the user's name is Bob? So I'll set the username to Bob, because you can do all sorts of nasty things in here, like setting values that you wouldn't normally be able to set in the code. And then that will allow you to see in the debugger what would happen if the state of the application was slightly different. I mean, you can use it to see things as well. So I can say, where am I? I have a Trisha, don't I? So I can just, I can have a look at the value, but I can also do Trisha.firstname equals Bob, and then see what happens. It'll give me an error, but it will quite often actually change that thing. It didn't there. But anyway. So debugging. The point, I don't have time to really demo this. The point about a good tool is that it should remove friction. So it should make things a lot easier for you as you're doing your job as a developer. So, for example, the IDE is an integrated developer environment. So it's integrated with your version control system. It obviously has an integrated debugger. It's integrated with pull requests and pretty much anything, really. So the tools should be able to allow you to stay in the flow instead of alt-tabbing into something else. For example, I quite often use the terminal inside IntelliJ IDEA, because if I alt-tab out to the terminal, my brain just loses all possible context. Whereas if I do it inside the IDE, I can see which file I was working on, where I was, and what I was trying to do. Collaboration. So collaboration from the space thing, our tools should help us to collaborate, but it's not just about using like Zoom or Slack or whatever. It's also about using, for example, looking at pull requests inside the IDE. So this way, again, I can collaborate with people, but I don't have to go outside of my tool. I don't have to go to the browser to have a look at GitHub. I can actually look at those pull requests inside my IDE. I can type some comments and stuff. So I'm not paying so much of a cost of context switching. I can have everything closer to where I am and where I like to work. Obviously, IntelliJ IDEA also has Code with Me to allow me to do remote pairing, which I used a lot when I was pairing with my colleague on a particular project, and we dial in every day. You're working on the same code in the same editor. You also have a call window, so you can see them if you want to, and you can literally pair together even if you're 1,000 miles apart. And I actually learned a lot about using Java from IntelliJ IDEA. So my example is always Java 8, which I know is ancient by now. But when lambdas and streams came in, method references, and all this weird foreign functional style stuff came into Java 8, and IntelliJ IDEA would tell me, you don't need it to look like this. This is what a lambda expression looks like. Or you can use a method reference here, and here I will do it for you. So it kind of helped me to learn as I went. I didn't necessarily have to go away and read the book on Java 8 in order to understand how all the new features in Java 8 worked. I get the help inside the IDE as and when I need it in the context of the thing I'm working on. That way, it's really bite-sized learning, which is applicable to me, and I don't have to wade through lots of information to figure out what I do and do not need to know. I found out that in Java 23, they've got the underscores for parameters in lambdas. So if it's an unused parameter, you can represent that as an underscore. And I discovered that because IntelliJ said, you can use this. And I was like, oh, that's cool. They've been talking about doing that for ages, and now it's actually in the version of Java that I'm using. If you put all of this stuff together, all of the generating the code, all of the having the context in the editor in terms of some readable documentation or in terms of being able to navigate through to the libraries that you're using, it helps you to stay in the flow. It helps you to prevent context switching. All of this kind of helps us stay focused on the thing we're trying to do, which is what makes us productive. And flow feels good. We hate it when someone interrupts us when we're coding, right? I mean, there's all sorts of web comics about, the 20 minutes it takes to build the mental model, and then someone just says, hey, can I ask you a question? And the whole thing just disappears. Being in a flow state feels good. I took this from Wikipedia, so it must be true. Flow is an innately positive experience. It is known to produce intense feelings of enjoyment. Several studies found that flow experiences and a positive effect go hand in hand. So flow feels good, and it is positive as well. It is productive, and we know that as developers. So flow leads to satisfaction, and satisfaction leads to productivity. And all of these things are part of the SPACE framework way of measuring productivity. We have satisfaction and well-being, we have efficiency and flow, as well as activity, communication and collaboration. And the one I didn't mention is performance, because I find it difficult to get my head around that, but performance is really how well do things perform in terms of like QA and quality and things like that as well. It's not just about my performance as a developer. So when you're looking at the tools that you use, the processes that you use, the environment that you're working in as a developer, you should be asking yourself, does this enable me to be creative and happy? One of the things the reason I still keep talking about IntelliJ IDEA, even though I don't work for the company that makes it anymore, is because it does enable me to be creative and happy. It makes me feel good when I'm coding. I should also be thinking about what slows me down, what's getting in my way. And I think you'll find, if you're anything like me, there are things that are slowing us down that we don't even really notice. So now I work for Gradle, we talk a lot about build times or flaky tests or basically the path to production from the code to getting it to a user. There's a lot of things here which can slow us down and grind us down and add friction, and we don't always notice. We quite often just go, well, the build used to be 2 minutes and now it's 5 minutes, but, whatever. But I think we need to step back and think about whether this is really impacting us as developers. What adds friction? Are there too many steps to the process of getting stuff out? Are code reviews just too difficult to get someone else to review our code, and there's a lot of backwards and forwards? Are there too many forms to fill in order to get a change made to CI? That kind of thing. We need to be looking at those things and trying to optimize the things that are adding too much friction to the things we do every day. And what breaks my flow? Now, I've been talking about writing code, so and I've been talking about staying in the flow because the tool is going to help us. But I know realistically what breaks my flow is someone calling me up and saying, "I really need to talk to you about a thing right now." And no amount of tooling is necessarily going to help you with that. But there are things which can break our flow in the tools that we use as well. So we need to be thinking about what's helping us to stay in the flow and what is really distracting us. So I'm going to leave you with this, really, which is, I've been focusing on writing code. This 2019 survey suggests that we only spend 32% of our time writing code. Who would agree with that? About 32% of our time. Who spends more than 32% of their time writing code? Like almost no one. Oh, that's really sad. Who spends less than 25% of their time writing code? Almost everyone. That's super sad. And so here's the thing. So I've been talking about a tool which will actually help us write code faster, but really that's only 32% of our time. Although this suggests that code maintenance and testing is a separate part to writing code, which I don't really agree with. But there's other stuff that we're doing as well. There's meetings and security issues, whatever that is, and other. I really want to know what 9% of other is. I think for me, in my working day, it's probably 65% other, and then like 1% writing code, and then meetings. So, of course, we can optimize the writing code experience, but we are also probably going to want to step back and go, okay, what else are we spending our time on, and is that valuable? And meetings can be valuable, because this can be part of the collaboration and communication, part of the satisfaction, and building the right thing, and building the thing right. So our productivity is an investment. It requires us to invest time and money into our own productivity. Ideally, we would like our organizations to invest in that too. So by all means, get them to buy my book. That would be awesome. Or get them to call Gradle or whatever. But we need to invest time and money into the correct tools to help us be productive as developers, but also to look at the processes which might be slowing us down and getting in our way. Finally, as promised, a QR code which has all of the links to all of the information I showed, the live template, custom live template, and so on. If you want to win a free copy of my book, that is the purple QR code there. If I'm standing in the way, I'm really sorry. So by all means, take a look at those. Thank you very much.